Let me introduce to you Miss Wendy Wright. Ms. Wright is the Vice President of Center for Family and Human Rights Institute, CFAM, and former President of Concerned Women for America. She was named the 100 Most Powerful Women of Washington by Washingtonian Magazine and one of the top 10 people of 2010 by Inside the Vatican magazine. She's a veteran advocate for life and family issues. She has met with heads of state, advised international and congressional leaders, testified in Congress and state legislatures, and trained non-governmental NGOs and advocates. Her work influenced landmark ruling on freedoms of speech in the U.S. Supreme Court and several U.S. state courts. Ms. Wright has been quoted or published extensively in every major U.S. news outlet, including CNN, Fox News, PBS, NPR, the New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, Christianity Today, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Welcome, Ms. Wright.
Well, thank you, and I'm very grateful to the sponsors for providing this forum today to discuss a really difficult issue, and that is the sexualization of children. Several years ago, a couple of birds built a nest on my balcony, and I got to watch their life cycle. I saw how the mother and the father prepared the nest with great care to ensure that the baby, the eggs and the babies would be safe. And then when the eggs hatched, one bird would stay with the nest throughout the day, and you could almost time it at 6 o'clock. They would switch. The other bird would come and watch the children, and the first one would go off and do the outside work to help care for these babies. And at the right time, these very fragile birds were finally mature enough to leave the nest. But it wasn't until that time that they were pushed out of the nest. And one of the important roles that I saw the mother and the father bird do is protect these baby birds from predators that would reach inside the nest and snatch those babies. It's an instinct among us that we all know that maturing is a process. We are not born as adults in any sense of the word. Physically, mentally, socially, spiritually, we need to be nurtured and cared for. We're very sensitive in body, soul, and spirit, particularly as children and even as we grow up. And the family's primary function is to love, protect, nurture, particularly the most vulnerable of the family members, and that's children. And it's through our families that we learn norms. We learn what is right, what is wrong, what is natural, what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. We learn responsibility. We learn morality. We learn how to treat one another. And our families guard against harm. They ward off predators. And it's society's duty to assist families in all of these functions. And it's to society's benefit to help the family to be the first protector of children. For dysfunctional families, societies can counsel, correct, and if criminal activity is taking place like violence, then they absolutely should prosecute. But I think we all recognize that the most vulnerable people, especially children, are those without a family. They are the ones most likely to fall prey to a predator. Last week, a report was released that was widely noted by media of a staggering 1,400 cases of sexual abuse of children in care homes in one town in England over 16 years. An award-winning actress, Oscar-nominated actress, Samantha Morton, after this report came out, admitted that she had spent much of her childhood in these care homes, and she herself was sexually abused by 2 residential care workers while she was in that home as a teenager. When she was 13, she reported the abuse to authorities, but the men were not investigated. As she said, there was no support, no offer of counseling, no wanting to delve deeper. A lot of people who abused my friends were people in very, very top jobs within the social services. Now, this report detailed the sexual abuse and the collective failure of the community to deal with it. The police described these children as, quote, undesirable, and yet they were desired by men for sex. And somehow these children were thought capable of consensual sex with 5 men at an age of 11 years old. Despite the number of perpetrators, and authorities who allowed this to go on, it took hearing from these grown-up children to shatter the myth that these children were objects for sex. Yet the sexualization of children keeps pushing the boundaries in advertising, in media, in the culture, children's clothes, the media that they watch. They use sexiness to get girls to buy in order to be pretty and sexy. But this teaches harmful lessons about what it means to be a girl. It objectifies relationships, and it makes it harder for parents to do their job. It also grooms children to be abused. It feeds predators' depraved idea that children led them on, that children wanted their sex. In that one town in England, none of the authorities saw the children as children, innocent, naturally unaware of sexual acts, not mature enough to make adult decisions. Now, during this time frame, when the abuse was at its highest, or at least when the abuse, what the report looked into, there was a trend appearing that got named pedophilia chic. That is, that it's cool to break the taboo of adult-child sex. Around this time, there was a book published called Harmful to Minors: The Perils of Protecting Children from Sex, by Professor Judith Levine. And this book propounded the idea that the fears of pedophilia and internet sexual predators are exaggerated, that children have an innate right to information, a right to experience sexual pleasure, and a right to engage in sexual activities, and that sexual relationships with adults are not harmful. Now, the pedophilia chic trend went silent when the scandal of the Catholic priest abuse of children came to light, when the adults who had been victimized came forward. Now, that got most of the media attention. What did not get as much media attention is this abuse occurs, it's widespread in schools and in other places where there are authority figures that are allowed access to children without boundaries. Teachers, coaches are abusing kids, and now we're seeing kids abusing kids. Sexual perpetrators who are assisted by authorities, sexual predators are assisted by authorities who excuse even rape as no big deal. Last year, a judge concluded a 14-year-old rape victim was, quote, as much in control of the situation, unquote, as her 54-year-old school teacher rapist. The girl killed herself weeks before her 17th birthday. After that, her predator, the rapist, was sentenced to 30 days in jail. Her mother's sentence, saying, if you blame the victim, even if she was only 14. Judge Richard Posner in the United States, he's on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, he wrote a book in 2011 called Economic Analysis of the Law. And in that he says, but some rapists derive extra pleasure from the fact that the woman has not consented. For them, rape is not a purely coercive transfer and should not be punished if the pleasure to the rapist, as measured by what he would be willing to pay, though not to the victim, in other words, if he paid, say, to get a license from the government, for the right to rape, if his pleasure from that rape exceeds the victim's physical and emotional pain, then that would be justified. Richard Posner praises Alfred Kinsey, a sexologist who changed the perception of human sexuality in the 1950s with his infamous Kinsey reports. Posner wrote, "The two Kinsey reports remain the high-water mark of descriptive sexology." He calls Kinsey the central figure in the scholarly science of sexology. The Kinsey report was the basis for relaxing attitudes and penalties for sex crimes and for sexuality education that graphically teaches small children about controversial sexual acts. He claimed children are sexual from infancy. Primary sources for him were adult men who recorded details of their sexual contact with children for his book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. According to Kinsey's research, rape doesn't really hurt women. In his 1953 volume, Sexual Behavior in the Human Female, Kinsey wrote, "Among the 4,441 females reporting rape on whom we have data, there was only one clear-cut case of injury and very few instances of vaginal bleeding, which, however, did not appear to do any appreciable damage." In the name of science, Kinsey facilitated the systemic sexual abuse of hundreds, if not thousands, of children and infants. One man provided Kinsey details of his abuse from 1917 to 1948, shown in Table 34. This table appears in his books. It records the number of, quote, orgasms in certain time periods by children as young as 5 months up to 14 years. Orgasm is defined as violent convulsions, sobbing, or more violent cries, sometimes with abundance of tears, especially among younger children. Excruciating pain. Will fight away from the partner and may make violent attempts to avoid climax, although they derive definite pleasure from the situation. Remember, that's the pedophile, the predator, who's stating that. One Kinsey source, beginning in 1943 during World War II, was a German Nazi officer. Fritz von Buloschek was convicted in 1957 of abusing children for over 30 years. The judge reportedly said, "I had the impression that you got to the children in order to impress Kinsey and to deliver him material." Paul Gebhardt, a Kinsey associate and later director of the Kinsey Institute, told a newspaper, "Of course we knew when we interviewed the pedophiles that they would continue the activity, but we didn't do anything about that. There couldn't have been any research if we turned them in." Gebhardt later said, "It was illegal, and we knew it was illegal, and that's why a lot of people are furious." Kinsey Institute Director John Bancroft said Kinsey assured, quote, his informants of anonymity and avoided any value judgments of their behavior. One victim of a Kinsey child molester came forward. When Esther White, a pseudonym, was 9, she found a sheet of paper, and my father was checking off things he was doing to me. After Kinsey interviewed Esther, he handed her grandfather a check for about $6,000. Kinsey claimed 95% of men committed sexual crimes, so society should redefine normal and reduce penalties for sex offenses. He testified on behalf of child molesters, and his work helped change laws to be lenient on sex offenses. 52 sex crime laws were targeted and subsequently changed to eliminate them as crimes or seriously reduce the penalties for committing them. In 1964, the Kinsey Institute launched SIECUS, the Sexuality Information Education Council of the United States, to promote Kinsey's ideology through sex education, to make his views the norm. Kids are exposed to sexual matters that were previously only in the reach of adults. The more exposure, the greater the consequences can be. Some will try to act out what they've been exposed to. Others, prone to bullying, will incorporate sexual behavior into their bullying behavior and engage in hurtful or intrusive sexual acts toward other children. Families need and deserve assistance to protect their kids, to reinforce morals, compassion, and to protect their innocence. For most people, we spend more years as an adult than as children. Let's let kids enjoy life before dealing with the complexities of sex. Thank you.